I held the test in my hand, staring at the two pink lines like they were a secret written just for me. After 3 long years of trying, of hoping, of crying quietly in the bathroom every month, it had finally happened. I was pregnant. I pressed the little plastic stick to my chest and let out a trembling breath. The baby was so small, still hidden, still quiet, but real. Inside me, growing, ours. In the kitchen, the October sun spilled through the windows, warm and golden, lighting up the table I had spent all morning decorating. My hands moved on instinct now, adjusting silverware, fluffing napkins, checking the roast for the 5th time. Today was my mother-in-law's 60th birthday, and every inch of the house was dressed for celebration. But I had my own secret to celebrate, my own joy humming just beneath the surface of it all. I imagined the moment. Ethan would take my hands, eyes wide with wonder, and spin me around the room. He'd laugh, maybe cry, kiss my stomach, say something ridiculous like, "We need to buy a crib today." We'd talk about names, about painting the guest room, about building a world for someone we hadn't even met yet, but already loved. I heard his voice before I saw him. "Babe, you in here?" "Kitchen," I called, stuffing the test back into my jeans pocket, my voice too bright, too casual. Ethan stepped into the room with that effortless charm that always made me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. His ocean blue shirt made his hazel eyes look almost gold in the sunlight. He kissed my cheek and took in the table with a low whistle. "Wow, my mom's gonna love this." "She deserves it," I said, smoothing the tablecloth unnecessarily. "60's a big deal." He leaned in and whispered, "Not as big as the news you've got for me, apparently." I smiled, almost shy. "Later, when it's just us." He grinned and kissed my forehead. "You're killing me, Anna." The doorbell rang before I could answer, and just like that, the moment was gone. The Mitchells had arrived. Eleanor walked in like royalty, her silver hair pinned up in a perfect chignon, her navy suit sharp enough to make you sit up straighter just looking at her. "Anna, sweetheart," she said, kissing my cheek. "Everything looks absolutely perfect." "Thank you," I said, offering her a glass of wine. "I hope it's to your liking." She smiled with rare softness. "It's lovely, truly." Frank, my father-in-law, nodded silently and handed over a bouquet of white lilies and a bottle of aged scotch. That was his way of saying, "Well done." The rest of the guests trickled in, Ethan's sister Angela and her husband Mark, their 2 kids already racing through the house, a few of Eleanor's retired teaching colleagues, some neighbors from across the street. The house was full of voices, clinking glasses, the smell of roast pork and garlic potatoes drifting through the air like a memory from childhood. Everyone said the same thing. "Anna, how do you do it? This is incredible. You're amazing." I smiled, said thank you, passed plates, refilled drinks, and all the while I kept touching my stomach like I was silently telling the baby, "You're already loved. You're already here." Ethan played the perfect host. Charming, attentive, hilarious. He told a story about a work trip gone wrong. Something about a hotel mix-up and a man in boxer shorts screaming at the front desk. The room erupted in laughter, even Eleanor. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, my heart full. He looked so alive, so confident, so mine. For a moment, I believed it. All of it. The clink of glasses, the scent of cake frosting, the hum of chatter in the living room. I wanted to freeze it there, to stop time right in that second. Before I found out, before everything I believed about my life shattered. But that came later. For now, I was just Anna Mitchell, wife, hostess, mother-to-be, and I had no idea that within hours, I'd be someone else entirely. It started with something simple. A question from Eleanor over dessert. "Where's Ethan?" she asked, glancing around the crowded living room. "Haven't seen him in a bit." I looked up from the coffee cups I was arranging. I hadn't noticed he was gone. He was just here. Maybe he stepped out for a call. I offered, though my voice felt strangely distant, like I was already somewhere else. Angela chimed in, probably in his study. He still keeps all his work files in there, right? I nodded and excused myself, wiping my hands on a towel as I walked down the hallway. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was nothing. Just a call. Just a client. That's what he'd say. That's what he always said. The door to his office was half shut. A sliver of warm lamplight spilled across the hallway floor. I reached out to knock, but then stopped. His voice floated through the gap, low and intimate, and nothing like the voice he used with me. I know, I hate it too, he whispered, and I heard a small chuckle, tender and soft. But what do you want me to do? The house is full of people. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My hand hovered above the doorknob. I can't just walk out. It's her mother's birthday. That would look bad even for me. A pause, then a laugh. No, of course she doesn't know. Anna believes everything I say. Like clockwork. My stomach turned. He continued. I'll tell her soon. A few more weeks. Let the party dust settle. Then I'll say we're just not working anymore. That it's no one's fault. That we drifted. You know, the usual soft landing garbage. I staggered back half a step, pressing a hand to my chest. I mean, come on. She still thinks we're going to have a baby, he said, followed by a cruel laugh. Poor thing's probably planning names. The queasy warmth in my belly curdled to ice. She's sweet, he added mockingly, but she's not you. She's soft, predictable. She'll cry, maybe beg, but she'll let go. Eventually. I backed away from the door as if it had burned me. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't want to. The hallway tilted under my feet. My legs turned to liquid. I barely made it to our bedroom before the tears came. Silent, uncontrollable, feral. I clutched the edge of the dresser, gasping like someone drowning above water. Every breath was a betrayal. How long had it been going on? Months? Longer? And Madison, was that her name? The one from the texts? The one in the red dress, the perfume I'd smelled on his coat once and believed when he said it was his co-worker's handshake hug? The dots connected themselves. Too fast, too clear, and suddenly I couldn't unsee them. In the pocket of my jeans, the pregnancy test pressed into my leg. I pulled it out and stared at it. The two pink lines glared back at me like a cruel joke. How was I supposed to tell him now? How could I say, we're going to be parents, to a man who was already planning to leave, to a man who thought I was weak, predictable, disposable? I heard his laughter from down the hallway, heard glasses clinking, the sound of a cake being cut, life moving on, oblivious, while mine was splitting down the middle. I washed my face, bit down hard on the scream building in my throat. I looked at myself in the mirror, a woman trying to hold her shape. Then I smiled, just enough, just wide enough to pass. By the time I returned to the living room, Ethan had reappeared, charming as ever, holding court like nothing had happened. His arm brushed mine as I passed, and he whispered, "You good?" I nodded. I lied, because the truth was, I had never been less okay in my life. That night, after the last guest had left and the dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen, Ethan kicked off his shoes and dropped onto the couch like a man who had just won something. He loosened his tie and patted the seat next to him. "Come on," he said. "Sit. You've been running around all day." I sat, but only because my legs still hadn't stopped shaking. He smiled at me, the same smile he gave to Eleanor earlier when she complimented the wine. The same smile he used when he was telling his ridiculous hotel story. The smile that used to feel like home. "So," he said, nudging my leg playfully, "what's the big news?" I looked at him, at his familiar face, and felt like I was seeing a stranger wearing a mask I used to love. My hand went instinctively to the pocket where the test had been earlier. I'd taken it out and hidden it under the sink. The proof of my joy, now a secret I didn't know how to share. "I'll tell you tomorrow," I said, managing a soft smile. "I'm exhausted." His brows creased with mild disappointment, but he shrugged. "All right, I'll hold onto the suspense. I watched him walk down the hallway to our bedroom, his shoulders relaxed, humming under his breath like he hadn't spent the evening plotting a quiet exit from our marriage. When the bedroom door clicked shut, I sat there alone, surrounded by half-empty wine glasses and crumpled napkins and leftover cake. The night had been a celebration, but it felt like a wake. I didn't sleep. I lay next to Ethan, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how many nights he'd slept beside me with her name in his mouth, her face in his mind. At some point, I realized the pattern, the unexplained late nights at work, the business trips that got extended, the cologne that wasn't his usual brand, the shirt I found in the laundry with a lipstick stain he claimed came from his sister hugging him too hard at a party. And I had believed it. Every lie. I told myself he was stressed, that the tension in his shoulders was from work, that the way he sometimes pulled away when I touched his arm at dinner was just distraction, that the way his phone never left his side anymore was just modern work life. God, how much had I ignored just to keep the illusion intact? The next morning, I got up early and started cleaning. Not because I had energy, but because I didn't know what else to do. I needed motion. I needed something to keep the panic from taking over. I scrubbed countertops that didn't need scrubbing, rearranged spice jars, wiped the inside of the microwave 3 times. Meanwhile, Ethan went for his usual post-party run, dressed in sweats, earbuds in, acting like the night before had been nothing but a success. The moment the front door closed behind him, I went straight for his phone. I knew the code. Our wedding anniversary. That irony burned. It only took a few seconds to find what I was looking for. The contact didn't have a name, just a number, but the thread of messages was unmistakable. I missed you all night. I hate pretending. When can we be done with this? And then, she won't see it coming. She still thinks we're solid. Attached were photos. One of them together at some overpriced restaurant I didn't recognize. One of her, Madison, in a red dress, the same one Rachel had described. Another photo taken on our back porch. My back porch. The wind chimes I hung last summer were in the background. I barely made it to the bathroom before the nausea overtook me. This wasn't morning sickness. This was betrayal. I sat on the cold tile floor, forehead against my knees, tears mixing with bile in my throat. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make the pain visible, but I couldn't, because no one else knew yet. To them, I was still the happy wife, the perfect hostess, the lucky woman who had it all. But I knew the truth now, and I couldn't unknow it. I didn't want to call Rachel. I didn't want to hear the sound of her voice, kind and knowing. I didn't want the sympathy, the outrage, the confirmation that what I'd heard, what I'd seen was real. But I also couldn't carry it alone. Not all of it. So I texted her, "Can we meet? Today. It's important." She replied instantly, "Of course. Same place?" At 11 a.m., I sat in the back corner of a little cafe we used to visit every Saturday morning before life got complicated and busy. I held a mug of tea I hadn't touched and tried to think of the right words. How do you even start a sentence like, "My husband is planning to leave me and doesn't know I'm pregnant"? Rachel arrived 5 minutes later, hair pulled into a low bun, denim jacket already slipping off one shoulder as she spotted me. Her eyes widened as she took in my face. "Anna," she said, sliding into the booth. Are you okay?" I shook my head, just once, and then the words came. I told her everything. About the phone call behind the office door, about the messages on his phone, about the photos, about Madison, about the test. I told her I didn't cry during the party, that I smiled and passed cake like everything was fine, that I lay awake next to him all night and stared at the ceiling, wishing I could be someone else, anywhere else, that I hadn't even told him yet, that I didn't know how. Rachel didn't interrupt. She just listened, her eyes growing darker with every sentence, her mouth tightening with quiet fury. When I finally stopped, my throat dry and my hand shaking, she leaned forward and whispered, "That son of a bitch!" It was the first time I'd laughed in days. A short, cracked laugh that made my chest ache. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, reaching for my hand. "Or suspect something?" "I don't know," I whispered. Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe I didn't believe someone like him would throw it all away. She hesitated, then said quietly, "I saw him once. A few weeks ago. With her. At the mall." I froze. "I didn't tell you," she continued, "because I thought maybe it was innocent." She was pretty, blonde. He was standing close. They were looking at rings. I didn't breathe. "Jewelry?" I asked. She nodded. She tried one on. He kissed her on the temple. I told myself it was probably work-related, maybe a favor. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. "He was buying her a ring," I said flatly. "He's planning to marry her after he divorces me." Rachel paled. "Anna, I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said. "It's mine. For not asking questions. For ignoring the signs. For trusting him when my gut screamed not to." She squeezed my hand. "Don't say that. Trusting your husband isn't a flaw." "No," I said, looking down at my stomach. "But trusting the wrong man might be." We sat in silence for a long time. Around us, the cafe filled and emptied and filled again. Waitresses refilled mugs. The espresso machine hissed. Someone dropped a spoon. I barely noticed any of it. Finally, Rachel asked, "What are you going to do?" I looked her in the eye. My voice didn't shake this time. "I'm going to see a lawyer." "Good," she said. "And what about the baby?" I placed a hand over my stomach. "I'm keeping it." "You won't be alone," Rachel said firmly. "Whatever you need, I'm here." I believed her, and for the first time since the world cracked open, I felt something unfamiliar flicker inside me. Not rage, not grief, strength. Maybe I didn't need to survive this alone after all. But even if I had to, I could. I spent the afternoon preparing dinner, not because I wanted to cook for Ethan, but because I needed a setting, a stage, somewhere to place the truth and let it speak for itself. I made his favorite, steak with garlic butter, mashed potatoes with roasted rosemary, Caesar salad with fresh Parmesan. I set the table like it was a date night we hadn't had in years. I lit candles. I opened the wine he liked. I even changed into a dress he once said made me look beautiful. Back when I still believed he meant it. At 6:03, the front door opened and his voice called out cheerfully, "Smells amazing in here." I smiled and met him at the door. "I thought we could have a nice dinner." He raised a brow, amused. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said. "Just us." He kissed my cheek and wandered into the dining room, humming as he poured himself a glass of wine. "Wow," he said, looking at the table. "This looks incredible, babe." I sat across from him. "You're welcome." We ate mostly in silence. I let him talk about work, some annoying client, a coworker who never replied to emails on time. He asked me once if I was okay. I smiled and said I was tired. That was all he needed to hear. He never asked again. After dessert, he reached for his wine glass, but I stopped him. "Ethan," I said softly, "we need to talk." He froze, just for a second, then placed his glass back down, fingers tightening around the stem. "About what?" "About us." He leaned back, slightly, his expression guarded. "Okay, what's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked to the other side of the table, and sat next to him on the couch. I wanted him close. I wanted to see his eyes when the mask fell. "I know," I said. His brow furrowed. "Know what?" "I know about Madison." His jaw didn't drop. He didn't gasp. Just blinked. Once. Slowly. "What are you talking about?" "I heard your phone call during the party," I continued. "I read the messages. I saw the pictures. You can stop pretending now." A long pause. Then, quietly, "How long have you known?" "Since your mother's birthday," I said. "Happy anniversary." He rubbed his hands over his face, exhaled, and looked down at the floor. I didn't want it to happen like this. But you did want it to happen. He looked up at me, eyes full of something between shame and resignation. Yes. Do you love her? Silence, then a nod. I swallowed hard. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Maybe because the hurt had already settled in. Maybe because part of me knew all along. And me? I asked, did you ever love me? He looked at me then, really looked. I did. I still care about you, Anna. But not enough to stay faithful. Not enough to be honest. I was going to tell you, he said. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed, bitter and cold. Too late. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. There's more, I said. I'm pregnant. That got him. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide. What? I found out the morning of the party, I said. I was going to tell you, before I found out who you really are. He stood up and began pacing. You're serious? I nodded. He ran both hands through his hair. Oh my God, this changes everything. No, I said. It doesn't. He stopped. Anna, I'm keeping the baby, I said calmly. And I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. His mouth opened, then closed. I gave you 5 years of my life, Ethan, I said. And I would have given you 10 more. But you gave yourself to someone else. You made your choice. He sat down slowly, like the weight of his lies had finally settled on his shoulders. I didn't think it would go this far. It did, I whispered. And now we're done. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And in that silence, I felt something inside me shift. Not break. Not collapse. Strength. Ethan packed a bag that night. Not everything, just the basics. A few shirts, a pair of shoes, his laptop. He said he'd come back for the rest when things were less tense. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't throw his clothes out the window like a woman in a movie might have. I just stood at the door and watched the man I thought I knew walk away without looking back. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed felt louder than any argument could have been. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold before I ever took a sip. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From exhaustion. From the overwhelming need to survive. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into the law office of Michael Hargrove, a man Rachel had recommended months ago when her cousin went through a divorce. His office smelled like leather and old books and quiet power. Tell me everything, he said gently, and I did. I told him about the affair, the texts, the photos. I told him I was pregnant, that I wanted to keep the child, that I didn't want a drawn-out courtroom war. But I also wasn't going to be the woman who let her cheating husband walk away clean. He listened, took notes, nodded at the right places. When I finished, he leaned back and said, You're in a strong position, Anna. He stepped out. You have proof. You're carrying his child. The law is on your side. I felt a strange sensation, then a flicker of control. It wasn't much, but it was enough to stand on. After the meeting, I went to the clinic to confirm the pregnancy. 6 weeks. Everything looked normal. The doctor handed me prenatal vitamins and a pamphlet titled, Your Body and Your Baby, First Trimester. I held it in my hands like it was a passport to a country I hadn't meant to visit alone. When she asked if the father knew, I said yes. I did mention he was now an ex-husband in waiting. Next, I stopped by work. My boss, Linda Carlson, was already at her desk, sipping coffee and going through paperwork. I sat across from her and said the words I hadn't rehearsed, but somehow still came out steady. I'm going through a divorce, and I'm pregnant. She blinked, then set her coffee down. Oh, Anna, I'm okay, I said quickly, even though I wasn't. I just thought you should know. I'll keep working as long as I can. I need the income, and I need the distraction. She nodded slowly. You've always been one of the most reliable people here. Take whatever time you need, and when you're ready for maternity leave, we'll figure it out. I wanted to cry at her kindness. Instead, I smiled. Thank you. I came home to a house that felt too quiet. Ethan's shoes were gone from the doorway. His toothbrush no longer sat beside mine. His cologne no longer lingered in the hallway. I walked through each room slowly, like I was meeting them again for the first time. In the guest room, the one we had once said would be the nursery, I ran my fingers along the windowsill and tried to picture a crib, a rocking chair, a new life. Later that night, I FaceTimed my parents. They were shocked. My mother cried. My father's voice shook with restrained anger. But when I told them I was pregnant, something changed. My father sat back, his eyes suddenly soft. My mother wiped her face and whispered, "A baby, you're going to be a mother." "Yes," I said, "on my own." "You won't be alone," she replied. "You have us." And again, like with Rachel, like with Michael, like with Linda, I felt it. Support. Real, steady, grounded support. I didn't know how the next week would look, or the next month, or the next year. But I knew this much. I could breathe. And that was enough for now. 3 weeks after Ethan left, I finally took down the framed photo of us in the hallway. The one where we were standing on a cliff in Big Sur, wind in our hair, sunlight in our eyes, pretending we were invincible. I stared at it for a long time before carefully wrapping it in newspaper and tucking it into a box labeled Old Life. I didn't throw it away. I wasn't there yet, but I didn't need it on the wall anymore. The days became rhythm. I worked. I cooked. I went to appointments. I started a journal, not the kind where you write about your feelings with flowers in the margins, but one where I recorded symptoms, cravings, strange dreams, baby name ideas, and notes to the little life growing inside me. "You're the reason I get up when I don't want to," I wrote one night. "You're the reason I haven't fallen apart." My body began to change, subtle at first. A tighter waistline, a deeper hunger, a fatigue that no coffee could cure. But inside I was rebuilding, not just from Ethan's betrayal, but from years of being small to keep someone else comfortable. Years of folding myself down so his ego could stretch out on the couch. Now I was unfolding. Rachel helped me clear out his things. She didn't ask questions, just brought trash bags and determination. "Do you want to burn this?" she joked, holding up one of his college sweatshirts. I laughed. Tempting. But no. Let's just drop it at Goodwill. Let someone else warm their arms with what I've outgrown. We worked in silence, mostly. Boxed up books. Tossed old razors. Scrubbed the bathroom like we were erasing his presence. When we finished, the house felt lighter. Airier. Like I could finally hear myself think. That night, I lit a single candle and curled up on the couch with a bowl of soup and a baby book Rachel had gifted me. "You're stronger than you think," the first page read. And for once, I believed it. Ethan tried to contact me twice. Once by text, "Can we talk?" "I miss you." I didn't reply. The second time, he showed up at the door. It was raining. He looked soaked, disheveled, like a man who'd lost his script. "I just want to talk," he said. "No," I replied, calm and steady. "You don't. You want to feel better." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected. "Now live with it." He looked over my shoulder toward the hallway, maybe expecting to see some trace of his former life. The shoes, the photos, the woman who used to say yes too easily. But that woman wasn't here anymore. "I hope Madison was worth it," I said gently, then closed the door. I didn't cry afterward. I sat down, folded a load of laundry, and put on soft music while I made a grocery list. Not because I wasn't angry, not because I wasn't still healing, but because I was doing something Ethan never thought I could do. I was moving forward. On Sunday morning, I walked into a local parenting class at the community center. Alone. I introduced myself to the group and took a seat in the back. A woman named April sat beside me and smiled. "First one." I nodded. "Me too," she said. "My ex ran off to Colorado with his yoga instructor." We both laughed. There was something healing about that laugh. Like we weren't victims. We were women in motion, women becoming. And as I drove home later that afternoon, the fall sun warm on my face, I realized something else. I wasn't just surviving. I was standing. And soon, I'd be ready to run. The first time I heard her cry, everything else disappeared. The white walls of the hospital, the sterile scent, the nurse's gentle rush around me. None of it mattered. All I could hear was her voice, tiny, fierce, undeniably alive. They placed her on my chest, and she was warm and damp and pink and perfect. I stared down at her, this little soul who had grown quietly inside me through months of heartbreak and change, and whispered, "Hi, baby. It's just us now." And it was enough. I named her Clara Grace. Clara because it means bright, clear. And that's what she was to me, the clarity after the storm. Grace because I'd survived only by learning to give myself some. Rachel was the first to visit. She brought flowers and a stuffed fox and a giant thermos of soup. "You did it," she said, eyes wide with pride. "No," I replied, "we did." The nurses said I was one of the calmest first-time mothers they'd ever seen. I didn't tell them it was because I'd already lived through the hardest part. Labor had nothing on betrayal. My parents came 2 days later. My father held Clara like she was made of glass, and my mother wept so gently I almost didn't notice until she kissed my forehead. "I'm sorry for everything we didn't see," she whispered, "but I see you now." I stayed at their house for the first month, not because I couldn't manage on my own, but because it gave them a chance to love me in the way I hadn't let them before. And maybe because I needed to be loved without condition. Ethan sent a letter. No return address. Just his handwriting on cream-colored paper. "I don't deserve to be a father, but if you ever want her to know me, I'll wait." I read it once. Then again. Then I folded it and tucked it into the back of Clara's baby book. Not as an invitation, but as a record. A reminder that people make choices, and those choices shape everything. I never replied. We moved back into my house that winter. I painted the nursery yellow. I hung up tiny prints of flowers and clouds and framed a quote above her crib. "You are loved. You are safe. You are wanted." And I meant it with every cell in my body. Some nights, when Clara wouldn't sleep, I'd walk the hallway with her cradled against my shoulder, whispering songs I barely remembered learning. I'd press my cheek to hers and tell her stories, not about Ethan, but about strength, about joy, about beginnings that come after endings, about how she saved me without even knowing it. I started writing again. Not just journals this time, but real stories. About women finding their voices. About mothers who rise. I submitted one to a small online magazine. They published it. A month later, another editor reached out. Then another. People wanted to hear what I had to say. I created a small writing nook in the corner of the living room, right beside Clara's play mat. She'd lie on her back and kick her legs while I typed. Every once in a while, I'd read her a line, just to see if she smiled. She always did. And on the rare day I felt the old sadness creep back in, the loneliness, the ache of what was lost, I'd open the front door, step into the sunlight, and whisper, "Look what we built, baby. Just us." Clara would blink up at me, gummy and grinning, and I'd remember that I hadn't just survived. I had started over. And in this quiet, honest life, with its laundry piles and lullabies, its 3 a.m. feedings and 6 p.m. sunsets, I found something Ethan never gave me. Peace. She doesn't know it yet, but Clara is my redemption. And when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her, "Your father left, but I stayed. You were never abandoned. You were chosen every day, every minute by me. Because in the end, she's all I need now."